My name is Cecilia Poulain. Welcome to the Pathway to Partnership podcast. On this podcast, we talk about what it takes to succeed as a woman lawyer in a law firm. My name is Cecilia Poulain, and I'm a former finance lawyer. I now help women lawyers make it to partnership using the tools and insights I've developed in my Pathway to Partnership program. In this podcast, you'll get clarity on whether partnership is truly what you want, you will build your confidence, and you will master client development in a way that feels sustainable, in a way that works for you. So let's get you walking into the office every morning, clear on why you're aiming for partnership, free of imposter syndrome, and confident in your ability to bring in clients without burning out. I just want to be the best lawyer I can be. I hear that from women lawyers all the time. But if you want to make partner, being the best lawyer you can be simply isn't enough. Apart from all the other skills you need to develop, you also need to be seen as a leader. But it's not that easy to go from being a great lawyer to being the best lawyer you can be to stepping into leadership. It's not the same skill set. I was coaching a lawyer in one of the big international firms in Paris a few years ago. And after we'd finished working together, she went to the women's group in her firm, and she told me that she was really struck with how passive the women were, that they were meticulous, reliable, conscientious, but they were scared of taking risks. They were scared about being exposed. They were scared of making mistakes, and they weren't being proactive in their careers. At the same time, what I hear is that women lawyers are sometimes being yelled at. They're being interrupted. That's a huge problem, not just for women lawyers, but for women generally. They're being shut down. And women, when they get feedback, they will hear the negative far more than the positive. And so, because in some law firms, the management isn't as great as it could be, and I actually think that's a big problem across law firms generally, then that has a big impact on the women lawyers. And so that means that they shut themselves down. They don't take risks because they're afraid. But then they don't learn to be a leader. What is a leader? I'd like to define what a leader is by making a distinction between a leader and a manager. So a manager is somebody who focuses on getting the job done. They're the one who distributes the work. They're the one who makes sure that deadlines are met. They're the one who is reviewing work product, all of that good stuff. A leader, on the other hand, is the one who defines a goal and inspires and empowers people to work together towards that goal. And crucially, a leader is someone who is prepared to make the decision. And that can be scary because when you're the one who makes the decision, you can feel very alone and you will be judged. And you will sometimes be judged very harshly. And that can be terrifying. How do you move from being a great lawyer to being a great leader? There's a lot of talk about women having to take more risk. And, it goes with women having to do more competitive sport, to be more competitive, you know the debate. In terms of women taking more risk, I would say yes and no, because it depends what risks we're talking about. I think we need to be a little bit more nuanced than just say women have to globally take more risk. So, for example, during the financial crisis, Christine Lagarde said there was too much testosterone in the trading rooms of banks. All those guys who were making decisions and taking way too much risk. So we're not talking about taking more risk in the decisions we're making. What we're talking about is taking the risk of being exposed and therefore of being criticised. The risk of putting yourself out there. And we'll look in a moment at what are the different ways where you might have to think about putting yourself out there more. And if the idea of exposure sounds terrifying, and if you're the type of person who hates speaking in public, that's something that you can learn, but in a way that works for you, because we're not all the same. For some women lawyers, they're completely comfortable with all of that. But for some, faking it until you make it, it just simply doesn't work. If it doesn't work for you, could I suggest that you reach out for help either to me or to another coach or somebody else? But if you are okay with exposure, perhaps you need to be looking at whether you are taking enough risk to be seen. So in the journey moving from being the best lawyer you can be to being the best leader you can be, you need to move from being passive to being proactive. In her fabulous podcast on time management for professional women, it's called The Bright Method, Kelly Nolan talks about how at the beginning of your career, you don't have a ton of control over your calendar because you're very reactive to what's coming in, and you are just basically doing the work and then giving it back. But as you become more senior, you actually need to become less reactive and take time to schedule time for deep thought, because what you're being paid for as you become more senior is your thoughts and the way that you resolve problems. So you need time for that. And it's the same when you move from being a younger lawyer to moving up into leadership, because you're moving from learning how to produce beautiful, perfect work, how to research, how to draft a contract that functions, how to draft pleadings, how to speak in court, whatever it might be. You're moving from producing all that stuff to becoming far more proactive in the way that you run your career. And in a moment, we'll be looking at what proactive can look like. So you're moving from perfection, which can feel very seductive and very satisfying, to actually taking ownership of your career. Okay, so what can being proactive look like for a woman lawyer? Firstly, it means speaking up more on meetings and on client calls. And here's the important bit. Even if you're not 100% sure you're right. This is an enormous problem for women lawyers. I hear women telling me all the time that they know that they should be speaking up more, and their partners are even telling them, you should be speaking up more, you should be taking the lead, but they're not doing it because it feels so scary to not be 100% right, to make a mistake. So there can be ways that you can do this where you can back yourself. You might want to say to the partner something like, I'd really like to take the lead more in client calls with a client. I'd like to take the lead more in meetings, but I'm going to need your help. And say to them, is it okay if I take the lead in this call? And I'd really appreciate it if I do say something stupid, or I say something that's not right, if you would just be there to leap in and help. You can have those conversations with your partner, and that makes it a little bit more comfortable to take those risks. And sometimes it can actually be more comfortable to just let other people do the work, let other people do the talking. But if you want to become a leader, then you need to get used to that discomfort. Get used to being the one who is stepping up and talking, even if you don't feel 100% sure. Getting proactive means taking ownership of the relationships you want to create and the quality of those relationships. So I talked about this in a lot more detail in episode 2. I talked about getting help, getting emotional support. I talked about technical and career support, and building relationships with referral lawyers. So you might want to listen to that episode if you're interested in that. Getting more proactive means actually reaching out to partners, especially in the bigger firms, so that they know you. Because if they don't know you, like you, and trust you, then why would they make you a partner? Why would they be trusting you with a part of their business, a part of their livelihood? And so there needs to be a reframe here, going from talking about office politics to actually building relationships with partners, with more senior partners. And that can be scary, especially with the really, the big boys and the big girls. But that's something that you need to get used to if you want to become a partner. It also means taking ownership of your learning, working out exactly what skills you need to become a partner, and there are a lot of them, and then developing a plan to learn those skills. So it might be management skills, it might be marketing skills, it might be financial skills. It also means taking ownership of client development, but taking ownership of it early in your career, so that when you're a partner, you've already got a whole lot of relationships with clients that have been built up over the years, and working out how to do it in a way that works for you. And if you need support on that, I'm more than happy to help. So how do you actually become not only a great lawyer, but a great leader? What is a great leader? This is a massive topic. There are a million books, a million podcasts, a million videos about leadership. But I'd just like to share 3 thoughts from 3 books that really impacted me. The first is Good to Great by Jim Collins, which is one of the great leadership books out there. And Jim Collins looked at he looked at 11 US companies that were consistently highly profitable and over a long period of time. And one of the things he found was that those 11 companies were all run by what he called level 5 leaders. The level 5 leaders were humble. They took blame for mistakes, but they attributed their success to good luck. And they were very ambitious, not for themselves, but for the company. And they were very, very persistent. And the question is, how do you become a level 5 leader if you're not all of those things already? And what Jim Collins, his theory is that there are actually 2 categories of people. There are those who actually won't ever be level 5 leaders because they can't get away from their own egos, and those that do. And that those who are willing to self-reflect, who are willing to consciously develop themselves, they can develop into level 5 leaders. So that's the first point I wanted to make about great leadership. The second point comes from a book called Crucial Conversations and many other books on the topic. In Crucial Conversations, they talk about how great leaders are those who don't go to silence or violence. They're people who speak their mind, so they don't stay silent when they've got something to say, but they also keep the conversation psychologically safe for everyone involved. And they are able to speak up to bosses, they are able to speak up to clients, to say when they think people are wrong, to challenge people, but in ways that preserve the relationship. Those skills, some people are lucky because they have those skills naturally. Most of us don't, but luckily they're skills that can be learned. So that's the second point I wanted to make about leadership. Now the third point comes from a wonderful writer called Will Storr. And Will Storr has written a lot of books, but the one that perhaps impacted me the most was the one called The Status Game. And in The Status Game, he talks about how we need status and we need connection. Because when we have status, we feel respected. And when we have connection, we feel we belong. And those two things are absolutely fundamental human needs. And when we don't get them, it actually has a massive impact not only on our psychological health, but on our physical health. But the problem is status and connection can conflict. And especially if you think about status as being domination, that you are a leader because you're dominating other people. And if we are thinking about creating community as serving, but not being recognised for our service, well then we can sometimes feel as though we're being used. So the way to reconcile those two things is to think of leadership not as domination, but as being proactive in creating community, teaching, serving, bringing others up, rather than trying to dominate them. And that's how you reconcile both status and community. So what happens when you adopt a leadership mindset? Well, first of all, when you do start to expose yourself a little bit more, when you start to take those risks, what you very quickly discover is actually those risks aren't risks at all, because there is only upside. Because most of the time when you take those risks, actually the reaction is incredibly positive. And when it doesn't go so well, it's just a chance to learn. And so it means that you're actually learning so much faster. And when you start acting as a leader, you are seen as leadership material. And so therefore you make partner faster. And perhaps the most important thing is that when you start actually being proactive in your own life, taking those risks, stepping out, you become happier because you feel more in control of your life and less at the mercy of others. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of the Pathway to Partnership podcast. I really appreciate it. And I hope that today's episode has given you greater clarity and confidence on your own pathway to partnership. And if you've enjoyed this conversation, if you've learnt something, please subscribe, please share it with a colleague, please leave a review. And together, let's help us make more women make it to partnership and thrive when they get there. And if you want to go deeper, head over to www.ceciliapoulin.com and you'll find resources and ways we can work together. So until next time, remember, you really don't have to do this alone, and you get to define success as a woman lawyer on your own terms. Thanks for listening.